World War One was called the Great War, or the War to End All Wars. It took place between 1914 and 1918. However, the United States did not enter the war until 1917. The causes of World War One is an acronym, MAIN, Main. One, militarism, so countries were building up their militaries. Um, Two, alliances. All of these countries were aligned against these countries over here, and so they're basically like two different friend groups who didn't like each other. Imperialism, which we talked about in the last unit, with bigger countries using smaller countries for political or economic gain. And then nationalism, or this idea of my country is better than your country. Now, the spark that started the First World War was the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. And because Austria-Hungary, they actually started the war, they had an alliance with Germany. And so when Austria-Hungary joined the started the war, Germany had to come in on their side. So they are part of the Triple Alliance: Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. And these guys were fighting against Britain, France, and Russia. And the United States will come in as a Triple Entente later on in the war. Um, and so, why did we get involved in the war? Um, One, um, the Zimmerman note, this was actually the final straw for us. It was a note that Germany sent to Mexico, and it was intercepted by Britain, basically saying, hey, if you guys will fund you guys fighting America, if you can keep them busy over there so they don't come to Europe. And of course, we're really upset because they were promising to take back states. Germany was sinking ships, and private ships, cargo ships, passenger ships. A lot of people were dying. And the Bolshevik Revolution, which is a fancy way of saying the Russian Revolution, and that was actually funded by Germany as well. So they did that first, and the deal was that if Russia would pull out, we'll fund this revolution. You guys take control of Russia. When you do, you pull Russia out of um, the First World War, and the Allies will have, the Triple Entente will have no ability because they were providing most of the soldiers. And it worked so well that they thought they could do it again with us and Mexico. And so this is the actual Zimmerman note, our Zimmerman telegram. We propose to make war together, peace together, generous financial support, and understanding that you are to take Mexico is to reconquer Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. So they wanted to take back Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. And so we declared war on April 6, 1917, and passed the Selective Service Act in May of 1917, because, again, our standing military was um, less than 200,000, and with the implementation of the Selective Service Act, we grew from around 200,000 to about 5 million in our armed forces. Some legislation that was passed during this time, Espionage Act, meaning it's a fancy way of saying spy. You can't spy against the United States. That's treason. Sedition, you can't talk badly about the United States. And there was a court case that was Schneck versus U.S., and it basically said they were arguing the legality of the Sedition Act because it violates the First Amendment. And they argued in this Supreme Court case that when we are in times of war, national security, that your constitutional rights can be revoked. Things like the freedom of speech. Again, like I said, our military was less than 200,000. By the end of the war, it was close to 5 million. And you had to be 21, 45. Everyone had to register for service. Now, when you turn 18, all young men still have to register for selective service. And it is, if you fail to do so, you can go to jail and have a penalty, a financial penalty. In 1918, the Spanish flu hit the world, and between 50 and 100 million people died worldwide. And so for you to kind of understand the sheer number of that, in 1918, during the First World War, America's population was just over 100 million people. So today we have about 330 million people. Then we had somewhere around 110 to 120 million people. So it wiped out worldwide nearly half the American population during this time. Very, very deadly. We only fought in two major battles during World War One, Saint Mihiel and the Argonne, because again we entered the war so late. World War One ended on the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour, so November 11th at 11 a.m. And that's why we celebrate Veterans Day every year, no matter what day it falls on. As far as during the week, it's always November 11th, and that is a national holiday because of World War One. The Paris Conference was held in Paris, and it was the meeting of the leader of Italy, the leader of France, our president, and the leader of Great Britain, and they got together to discuss how they're going to finish out, the war's over. What are we going to do? What does this look like? And so Wilson, our president, came with what he called the 14 points, and he had all these different ideas of moving forward, world peace, and how to prevent something like this from happening again. But unfortunately, these other world leaders did not really like it, because again, they'd been fighting this war longer than us and lost more people than us. Because again, World War One, we only lost of that nearly 4.8 million at the end. We only lost about 117,000 soldiers in the First World War, and over a third of those died from disease, specifically the Spanish flu. So we only lost the soldiers we actually physically lost that died from combat were unfortunately not only somewhere around 53,000 soldiers. The Treaty of Versailles took them 6 months to work out the end of the treaty that ended World War One, and it had a lot of different things, but the big ones that were so damaging, this is going to lead us into the Second World War. Germany had to surrender all territory. That makes sense. They lost. They could not have a standing military. Well, that's kind of, that's demoralizing to a country. They had to pay billions of dollars in reparations, and which they only finished paying in the last 20 years. Like, it was that much money. And so for you to kind of understand what it did to their economy, this little kid right here is playing with blocks of money. Their money was worthless because of the reparations, because it just bankrupted their country. And the war guilt clause, they had to take full responsibility for the war. They didn't start the war. Austria started the war. But they had to take full responsibility for the war, even though they didn't start it. So all of these things made the Second World War inevitable, because they had nothing to lose. They were bankrupt. They couldn't have a military, and everybody hated them. So it made someone like Hitler very able to rise to power because of the conditions that were left behind after the First World War. That is the end of World War One.